Here's Brody Brazil.
It's Tuesday, the 23rd of May, 2023, and on this date, it does seem like we have our most relevant development in about a month regarding the A's and potential relocation to Las Vegas. You may recall back on April 19th, that evening, the A's were part of word coming out that they would officially be turning their backs on Oakland with negotiations and putting all of their focus into Southern Nevada. Now, the Nevada Independent is the publication which officially broke that story. They're on top of this one. And their headline from this morning says, Oakland A's and state leaders reach tentative public financing deal. Legislative approval still needed. This comes to us from Tabitha and Howard. And again, as you followed along, their reporting has usually been first and quite always been very accurate. Here's what it says. I invite you to read this for yourself. I'll put links to it below. I'll also give you a little bit more analysis on the airport/FAA side of this, those approvals, later on in the video. The Oakland A's and major state officials have reached a loose agreement for a public financing package significantly less than the $500 million the team originally sought to assist in relocating the franchise to a $1.5 billion stadium in Las Vegas. Sources confirmed to the Nevada Independent today, on Tuesday. According to sources with knowledge of the discussions, the public financing package that will be presented to lawmakers will be lower than the initial threshold of $195 million in transferable tax credits the state set last week, and see a similar reduction from the initial request of the $200 million in bonds backed by Clark County. And to be fair and clear, the initial ask at the first site was $500 million by the A's. When they changed their focus to the Tropicana site, going from 49 acres down to 9 acres, the ask was only going to be $395 million. And we saw a report yesterday from Jacqueline Schultz of Fox 5 in Las Vegas saying that, in fact, that number initially that was discussed and universally understood of 195, it was going to be more like 175. That initial report does seem to agree with this in that it's going to be less than 195, and this report is also saying that the amount from Clark County could also be less than $200 million. That would instantly make you assume that the gap is being footed by the A's to secure that $395 million. Again, that's the assumption. The agreement was reached after weeks of discussion involving representatives from the Major League Baseball team, the governor's office, the treasurer, representatives of lawmakers, and Clark County, among other groups, and marks a sizable step forward after weeks of concerns from lawmakers in the county over the scope of the team's public financing request. And I'll tell you, it sure is interesting how all of this was about 6 weeks ago, and we really didn't see much forward progress in the way of coming together on numbers, a little bit of back and forth, a lot of silence along the way. Everybody's been waiting for this bill to be presented, which I think the article gets into. We're only 3 days away from it needing to be submitted, and we're not there yet. However, this agreement would lead you to believe that that's inevitably right around the corner. In fact, by the time you're watching this, it may have already happened. However, the agreement has not yet been presented to lawmakers and is expected to formally arrive in the next few days, as I just said. The deal has to be approved by the legislature before the 120-day legislative session ends June 5th, or else could end up being vetted in a special legislative session. Now, some background, some insight on this. At last check, there were hundreds of votes that needed to take place by the legislature with only a couple weeks until June 5th. Now, to be totally realistic about it, usually at the end of a legislative session, the votes that are needed start to happen fast and furious. Like, they will catch up on a large amount of that, but it's still not clear whether they will get to something this big, this relevant, this important, this detailed. There's a lot of other studies with the FAA. We talked about that, transportation studies, things that need to happen, which may also push this into a special legislative session. Let's understand, though, that a special session is not entirely unheard of, and it may change the dynamics of this. Instead of something that's going to be rushed and tried to be pumped out by June 5th, they'll have a little bit more time to properly digest this and get everything squared away. Sources indicated last week that lawmakers were only willing to contribute up to $195 million in transferable tax credits for stadium construction funding, and a dollar amount had not yet been agreed upon by Clark County. On Friday, Clark County officials said they were concerned taxpayers could end up on the hook to cover debt payments if the stadium wasn't generating enough revenue. And I think that's been backed up even since then through the weekend, saying that the absolute way they would do it if they don't have reserve funds and if this is a necessary thing where the ballpark and the A's are not generating what they need, they'd have to dip into reserves, or they would have to raise property tax to make up for the significant amount of money in paying off these bonds. The A's initially said they were seeking $500 million in public funding to assist with stadium construction, but in the weeks since, the team announced they were changing the proposed site and reducing the dollar amount request to $395 million. And I go back to all of that. When I first heard that number, it's supposed to sound a lot less. And it is. $105 million is not something I have in my pocket right now. But it's the old 1999 thing. It's not $20, but it's literally a penny away. Still, the A's seem to shave it down, and maybe that was enough to help Nevada lawmakers find it more palatable. The Nevada Independent granted an anonymity to the sources so that they could speak freely about the status of negotiations for the proposed 30,000-seat retractable roof stadium that the A's hope to open in time for the 2027 season. And again, they still are on track to be able to do that. And all of this is important, too, because the seasons of 25 and 26, they're not exactly nailed down, if you will. The Aviators ballpark, Las Vegas ballpark, that seems like the obvious choice and place. But what happens if 2027 turns into 28 or 29 or there's any kind of other delays? You are stuck at a minor league ballpark for, instead of 2, maybe 3 or 4 seasons. And that's why there's also a huge back-end time crunch on this, too. Approval by the legislature is one sign-off needed by the A's before construction could start on the ballpark. There's also this. Major League Baseball's Relocation Committee would also need to approve the project by January 1st. And that's what we've been saying all along here. There's 2 major things: getting an assembly bill passed for the funding and having Major League Baseball approve, along with some of the other studies and research and approvals like the FAA thing. All of that is part of it, but those are like ancillary as opposed to the 2 main things. The proposed stadium's proximity to Harry Reid International Airport means the team will also require approval from the Federal Aviation Administration before beginning construction. Quote, by law, developers must give the FAA the opportunity to evaluate proposed structures near airports to determine whether they could pose a hazard to aircraft or interfere with navigation aids, a spokeswoman for the FAA said in an email to The Independent. Quote, each determination is unique. Our determinations identify hazards to air navigation. Spoiler alert, you're looking at an FAA commercial licensed pilot and flight instructor. So I've got some background on this. I've got some more than educated thoughts on airports and obstacles, and I'll give those to you in just a second. Let's remember that paragraph, though, about aircraft and potential interference with structures, or in this case, especially navigation aids. But it's actually neither of those, which I think are what they'll consider most. We'll get back to that in a second. The A's announced on April 20th that they were acquiring 49 acres from Red Rock Resorts for a stadium and entertainment district at the Tropicana Boulevard and Dean Martin Road site. On May 15th, Tropicana operator Bally's Corp. And real estate investment trust Gaming and Leisure Properties Incorporated confirmed a report from a week earlier that the A's had abandoned the Red Rock site. The companies announced that they were giving the A's 9 acres of a 35-acre site that includes the Tropicana Las Vegas. GLPI said it would provide $175 million for, quote, shared improvements on the site. And let's not forget, as much as the $395 million of public funding was a request by the A's, and still will be, I suppose, a request by the A's, and maybe they've come down from it a little bit. Maybe they will fill the gap between the state and what the county is providing, and they'll fill the rest. But remember now, this $175 million by GLPI is also a huge gift. It's also, besides the free land, right, at the Tropicana site, like this number right here should dramatically help fill the gap of $395 million that's required for funding. So in the end, with the A's sounding like they might be, bridging the gap, that money helps. Let's also understand, I think the headline somewhere here about it being a loose agreement. I don't know if that was used here or on social media. Oh, right here. Yeah, first sentence. A loose agreement for a public financing package. Breakdown of this is simple. I mean, this wouldn't be coming out if there wasn't really something close. The loose part of it, I don't know what to think. It also still obviously requires a vote. I would imagine it requires some public commentary period. It is what it is. I will tell you this. What it is the most significant development for the A's and potential relocation, honestly, in more than a month. Everything that's come out since then, I mean, there have been some important things, some stuff to ponder and question and to think about, and even the site change. That was huge too, but nothing has been as big as this and what just came out this morning. Okay, let's get to the airport and FAA side of this. You're looking at Harry Reid International Airport. This is one of the busiest sets of runways in the country. And what you're looking at are two sets of parallel runways. I think it's runway 1 going this way and 19 facing the southerly direction. And I believe over here we've got runways, if I could actually find the beginning of it. Oh, there you go. 8 left and 8 right. There you go. 8 right, 8 left. So you've got two sets of runways kind of in that V-shaped formation. This is a pretty popular airport layout formation. I've also got highlighted in yellow the entire 36 or 7 acres of the Tropicana Hotel site. Now, there is a VOR, which is a navigation aid. I believe it's, if I could find it here, they're usually, oh, there it is right there. That is the navigation aid. That is the major navigation aid at Harry Reid International Airport. There's so much buildup here on the Strip. There's so many things in front of it. I don't think that is going to be a factor. It's quoted by the FAA. I mean, if you built a Major League Stadium here or here, that might be a factor to your navigation aid that's on the field at the airport. I think the biggest question the FAA will have, and I'm not saying that this is a deal breaker by any means, is actually with the retractable roof stadium right here, what does it look like when the roof is wide open and you have that light source emitting that's needed to brighten up a Major League Baseball field in all corners and quadrants at 10 o'clock at night when airplanes absolutely need to land and use these runways? Because you're really not on an approach path. You're not really in an approach corridor. If this ballpark were to be built right here, I'd say that is a huge red flag. You're on the approach end, bright lights. You're off here to the left. Let's say we're coming in for a landing on runway 1. And realistically, I mean, this is the view of a flight deck and what a flight crew would see. The captain and the first officer would see something like this. Now, this is where you really got to zoom in over here to see that. But there's where the stadium would be. Let's pretend roof open, pretty bright lights. What is the distraction factor out there? I mean, certainly there could be something. There could also be nothing. If you design this properly, all of your lights are below a stadium roof line. I mean, look, the Las Vegas Strip at nighttime, it's already right there. It's already lit up, but there's plenty of bells and whistles and lights going on there. Obviously, a stadium lighting, totally different than that. Way brighter, also focused, right? It's not going to be light thrown in all different directions, but it does need to light, about 4 acres of a major league field. So that's looking at it from, and what you have to do is consider this from every direction. Here's the view from the south looking north. It's off to the left. Maybe absolutely no factor here. Let's take a look at it from this direction. Would you be able to see, and they don't use this landing configuration very often, but they do land this way sometimes. Could you see that bright light off to the right from this approach end of runway 19? Maybe. It's possible. I also want to say that I don't think height of the stadium is going to be a factor. I mean, the MGM, to me, way taller. Is that the Mandalay Bay? Way taller than a stadium would be. Heck, the Tropicana even, probably about as high as a new stadium would be. So I don't think it's a height issue, a structure issue, a navigational aid issue. We're looking at these two runways here, which again are closest to the Tropicana site. Let's come back out this way and take a look if you're landing on, what did I say that runway was? 8, so this is 26 left and right. Yeah, so there's runway 26 left and right. What do you see from this end? Off in the distance to the right out there, yeah, you do kind of see, it's plain to see that the stadium will be visible from the runway. How much light will be emitted from it at nighttime? This is really the only thing I could think of the FAA having any type of issue here. And again, what that means, who knows? Look, you make this a completely domed stadium, or you say that all night games have to be played with the roof shut, and I don't see any factor at all here. Actually, coming from this direction, landing on the 8s left and right, this is probably the least of the factor. The stadium would kind of be blocked, if you will, by other buildings and structures, and really from this angle, it's off in your peripheral, so probably not a factor. But again, I mean, that's one of the studies being done. I go back to the other thing. Beyond the safety of air travelers, I mean, this is one of the busiest intersections of people leaving the airport, making this left on Trop, and having to head to the Strip. And 30,000 people in and out of there. I think that might be the bigger question. Again, I pulled this up earlier because I wanted to show you, yeah, the nav aid, the navigational aid is right there on the side of the airport. But again, I don't think that has much or anything to do with it. I don't think the structure height has anything to do with it. I think the only thing they will look at is the light, whatever light is being emitted from this stadium when the roof is open. But going back to this big news, I mean, this is certainly significant. I still want to point out that it requires a vote. How did this come out, by the way? Is this something that the A's wanted out there? Is this something that lawmakers wanted out there? Probably lawmakers. It shows that the A's are willing to come down on their numbers, meet the state of Nevada at a certain spot, meet Clark County. I think the biggest question for me, beyond the vote eventually, and also when this will all take place, is Clark County's involvement. They've really been non-committal to this entire process with the A's. And a large part of it is because they were a main factor in securing $750 million to help build Allegiant Stadium. They were the ones that initiated the hotel room tax that a lot of people, in retrospect, they're happy with Allegiant Stadium. Las Vegans seem pretty content with what they've built, how they've filled that venue, how it operates. There doesn't seem to be much question about that. What is a sticking point in reverse is how it was paid for, and specifically the fact that Clark County had to dip into their emergency resources. Now, some of that was during the pandemic, but what if the A's stadium doesn't provide as much income and funding to pay back the bonds as it's supposed to, right? As it's designed to? That's also a possibility. I mean, I hate to say gamble, but that is a little bit of a gamble. And so Clark County doesn't seem like all in, they're really going to do this. I have yet to see them. I mean, this would suggest that they're part of it. I've yet to see anybody from Clark County say, oh, we've got this. So I'm curious to see if they'll have a response to this, or if maybe they're just on board and maybe this is a lot more far along than anybody on the outside looking in knows. So there you go, the very latest on all of this. Thumbs up on this video since you watched here all the way to the end. Let me know what you think about it in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe so that I can see you back here next time.